I'm super excited to give you all the latest news from our big Labs2Zero program at I2SL today. So let's get started. So just a quick outline of what I'm going to tell you about. I'll tell you a little bit about how we created the program, the genesis of all of this, and then I'll go through some of the tools that we have available today and how they can help you solve problems in your lab buildings. We'll then talk about our brand new and upcoming professional accreditation and training program. So lots of things to go through. All right, so Labs2Zero, if you haven't heard about it, is the most ambitious program that I2SL has embarked on to date. We began development of the program in 2022, and we designed the program to save energy and reduce emissions in lab buildings, which is, of course, very simple to say. The idea was especially to fill the gaps that exist in the other efficiency programs that are out there that really just don't deal with labs. So I mean things like, most famously, there's no Energy Star score for lab buildings. But also plenty of other programs don't handle labs well at all or treat them as some kind of other category that gets lumped in with all our kinds of buildings that just aren't like labs. And we wanted to change that. And we think that today in 2026, 4 years into the program, there's an even greater need for Labs2Zero. With all the pressures that lab buildings are facing today to reduce costs due to funding reductions or to meet building performance standards that are starting to tighten, we now, more than ever, need a way to help lab building owners and staff find the best ways to improve the performance of their buildings and to reduce costs. And that is what this program is designed to do. And it's going to do that with a combination of scoring systems, tools to identify opportunities, and then training and certification components. So we set about creating this program in a pretty special way. So we wanted to make sure that it reflects, the program tools reflect the collective wisdom of the whole industry and that it draws in the expertise of the whole I2SL community. So what we did is we set up technical advisory councils with more than 100 volunteers from all across the industry to help us create this program. We also had 3 important development partners who provided engineering time and expertise. Those partners were Smith Group, Bureau Happold, and Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. And I want to say just right up front here, thank you to everyone who has been involved with making this program what it is today. We were also supported by more than 30 sponsors from across the industry, diamond all the way through silver. It's been wonderful to see companies and organizations from all across the industry contribute to this program and really support it and believe in it. I especially want to highlight our international partner because this is our International Education Week, Sustainable Labs Canada. We are really grateful to you as well for all of your support in this. So let's get right into talking about the tools themselves. So we've developed a good chunk of the program's planned tools so far, not all of them yet, but a lot of them. And today we're going to be focusing on 3 important groups of tools. So first, performance assessment tools to track and assess performance, identify outliers to target for projects, or celebrate success. Then we have our performance improvement tools, which go beyond just benchmarking to deliver quantitative assessments of the next steps to take to save money and energy in lab buildings. And then third here, our upcoming professional accreditation program, which is going to train up our whole industry, we hope, on high-performing buildings and on using our program tools to create impactful projects in their own buildings or in their clients' buildings. So let's start with the performance assessment piece of this. So we are very fortunate to have at I2SL the laboratory benchmarking tool. It's been around in one form or another for 20 years at this point, but it has grown really significantly and added a lot more components over that time. So the LBT still is this benchmarking analytics tool that sits on top of a very rich database of lab building attributes and energy usage. And the way people use this is they enter data on their building and then benchmark against other buildings in the tool. There's a couple different ways of doing that. There's a traditional way of filtering the anonymized data set, and then there's the scores that I'll tell you about on the next slide. But just here, I want to tell you that the tool is fully globalized. It even includes embodied carbon benchmarking these days. And it's got data at this point for more than 1,400 anonymized lab buildings that you're able to explore and compare with your own building. That's more than 250 million square feet of lab building space. The LBT is completely free to use. It is also easy to use, so definitely don't hesitate to give it a try. So I mentioned the scores. I'm going to talk a little bit more about them now. Every building that gets entered into the lab benchmarking tool, as well as being able to explore the database, receives 2 performance scores, one energy score and one operational emissions score. So you can view these scores as a kind of automated benchmarking. You don't need to kind of select your own sample of buildings to compare with. It's been done for you. These are both 1 to 100 scores, just like Energy Star scores. So, if you get a score of 80, that means your performance is better than 80% of the other lab buildings in the database. And we derived all of this in collaboration with Lawrence Berkeley National Lab based on a statistical analysis of all those anonymized buildings in the lab benchmarking tool dataset. So it's a really great way of comparing yourself in just a couple clicks with the entire dataset of buildings. The scores are completely free to obtain. So once again, no reason not to try it. And in fact, they're also really easy to obtain. So you really just need to enter about a dozen pieces of information on your building to get scores. And it's really simple stuff like the area of your building, the amount and type of lab space, the number of fume hoods is going to be a thing you enter. It's not complicated stuff about your lab building. And so actually a lot of people have been getting their scores. You can see this in this chart on the right, which shows the number of buildings entered in the lab benchmarking tool per year. Now, we launched the scores in late 2023, and so you can see there was a big increase in data submissions after we launched the scores. So people have been really entering their data, getting their scores, and it's been really fantastic to see that happen. And we know that people have been using their scores in various ways. We've seen them appear in corporate sustainability reporting, of course. You can also use them as part of GRESB submissions on the commercial real estate side. We're definitely seeing them appearing in both consultants' reports and internal reports, looking at ways to prioritize attention within a portfolio of buildings. Here's a building that looks like kind of an outlier. Maybe we should consider looking at it in more detail to figure out if we could, get some savings in that building. We also are strongly encouraging the submission of Labs2Zero scores along with I2SL Sustainable Lab Award applications. So we'd definitely encourage you to get your scores if you're hoping to win one of our awards this year. So one other thing before we move on to the next part is that because so many people are entering their lab building data, we were able to build up a much bigger data set a couple of years after having released these scores. And that was a real opportunity for us because, we were hoping it was going to happen one day, and it happened quite quickly, actually, because then we were able to do a reanalysis of that new data set to be able to improve the scoring formulation. And what I mean by improve is to make the score fairer for some kinds of lab buildings where we just didn't have enough data or enough high quality data on those buildings before. So we're taking the scores out of the pilot mode that we originally released them in and turning them into sort of official V1 scores. That's going to happen very, very soon. We're in the middle of the software project to do it. You're going to see the new scores appearing on the lab benchmarking tool probably in a couple of weeks, which is very exciting. And this is particularly exciting for buildings that were being scored a little bit unfairly before. Now, we were warning those buildings that were getting scored unfairly under the old scoring, but at this point, we're giving them better scores. So that at this point means buildings with a lot of vivarium space, buildings with a lot of fume hoods, like high fume hood density, and then buildings in very cold climates. So all of those types of buildings are going to get significantly higher scores than they did before, for the most part. Everyone else is probably going to see a slight decrease. The median score decrease is going to be a couple of points. But we're really excited to be able to have the program mature in this way and take the scores out of their initial pilot mode and into this official version 1. Okay, so now time to talk about the performance improvement piece of the program. So I'd like to introduce the AIM report. The AIM report is I2SL's automated energy audit tool for lab buildings. And nothing like the AIM report has existed before, certainly not as far as we know. So this is a tool that owners and their consultants can use to start to figure out how to save energy and costs in their lab buildings. It's a really great way to start to build the business case for any energy project in a lab facility. So when we started developing the AIM report a couple of years ago, we had a lot of really important goals in mind. And spoiler, I think we achieved all of these goals, but you'll see that as I show you the AIM report in a little bit. So we wanted this to be kind of a high level audit, something akin to ASHRAE level 1 level of precision. We wanted it to be really easy to use. You don't need to be an HVAC expert to use this tool. It was important that it be global, be able to be used by anyone around the world. That is now true. We needed it to be low cost. And when I say low cost, that means it had to be much less than the cost of an in-person standard traditional energy audit for a lab building. We wanted the results to be quantitative, give real savings and cost estimates that can be used to prioritize attention or make decisions. And then we needed it to be quick to use, objective. And by objective, we really, going back to this approach with the tax, we really mean that we didn't want this to represent the views of one person or one company. We wanted this to really represent industry collective wisdom on what you can do with a lab building to improve its performance. We decided to make this tool just focused on lab buildings because it's really for lab buildings that there exist those gaps in other programs that we just wanted to make sure we're filling those gaps. We don't need to do all the stuff that other programs do for other building types. And then we decided at first to focus on existing buildings rather than new construction ones. And this was a decision we made because most buildings out there are existing buildings, but we will get to the new construction piece as well, just a little bit later. So on this slide, we pretty much show everything that the AIM report does. So I'll walk you through it. The AIM report is going to take a user's building data from the lab benchmarking tool, just those few points that a person would have entered to get a score, perhaps. And then it's going to take that data and build an energy model of the facility in the background. And then the user is going to get to build a package of energy efficiency measures that's customized to their facility. So for every one of those measures that's applicable to that facility, AIM is going to calculate estimated energy savings and estimated implementation costs as well. And AIM is also going to take interactive effects between measures into account. So a lot of lab type measures are kind of interactive. A lot of them impact the room airflow, for example. And so AIM is never going to be double counting the savings coming from those measures. AIM is also going to list, as well as savings and costs, it lists next steps to go through to implement the measures, as well as which stakeholders you need to get involved at your facility to further develop the project to the point of implementation. Then for every package of measures that a user builds, AIM displays relevant case studies. So that means case studies sourced from an extensive database that we've been collecting. And it's going to choose case studies that are, and show you case studies that are from buildings and measures that are the closest match to your own building and package of measures, and are also the highest quality from the data set, meaning the ones that have the most information, the most useful information in the case study. And then when you're ready to share all of these results with somebody else at your organization or with a client, perhaps, AIM lets you generate a PDF report of all of this information that's easy to share with others. So it does quite a lot. It does some really cool things. I want to just mention one of these things about how it does its energy calculations, given limited information about a building. So what AIM does when it takes the LBT data is it recognizes that, most times when someone's using the LBT, they've entered, 10, 15 pieces of information on their building, which is nowhere near enough pieces of information to build a full energy model of a facility. And so what AIM does is it has a set of intelligent assumptions, algorithms that it uses to fill the gaps. So it makes assumptions based on other properties of the building or based on what is industry standard practice for labs to fill in all those gaps to be able to build a full energy model of the facility. It then has a measure, it has a library of energy efficiency measures, and then it combines that with the energy model to calculate which measures apply to the building and what their savings are. And then it shows the user a list of those applicable measures with costs and savings. And the user chooses from that list. The user chooses their own adventure by choosing measures and building a package of measures of energy efficiency measures. Now, of course, if the user has more information, if you've got more information in your facility, you can go tweak all of those assumptions and enter more data to make the calculations more accurate. But the really cool thing is that AIM doesn't need you to do that. It moves you through to the point of starting to see initial results very quickly. So hopefully it's clear that a tool like this could really be exceptionally helpful if you are tasked with reducing costs or emissions in a lab building. And so it's really directly applicable to many of the challenges that are facing lab owners today. So really, anytime you need to build the business case for energy projects, you should be thinking about using AIM. So, for example, if you've been tasked with finding cost savings, finding operational cost reductions at a lab facility, AIM is a great place to go to get initial ideas for that. An energy manager at a facility might use AIM to prioritize between different projects that could be implemented within one building or perhaps across a whole portfolio of buildings. If you're a consultant, you can provide AIM as part of your consulting services and then follow up with further development work with the owner or whatever else you want to layer on top of that. For equipment sales and vendors, AIM would be a great way of getting a third-party independent assessment of what a particular technology could save, because again, it's coming from I2SL's objective volunteer-based calculations. You could use AIM for doing long-range campus planning for emissions, building up, if I do this project, how much will I save over time? You could certainly use it for that. We'd love to see it used for that. And then AIM can also be used for utility companies. Now, utility companies are always looking for projects to incentivize, and so this could be a great way to identify lists of projects to do that. You're also going to be getting really familiar with AIM if you're participating in I2SL's Fume Hood Challenge that Gordon's going to be talking about, because participants in that challenge are going to be using it to help predict the savings from the challenge and also identify other opportunities at their facilities in a really quick and easy way. So lots and lots of ways to use AIM. We are already seeing, actually, we've got quite a lot of owners using AIM to look at their own buildings. And then we also have quite a few consultants who have started to do that thing where they're incorporating AIM in their consulting offerings. And it's been really awesome to see that start to happen. So just to give you a quick tour of the measures that are in the AIM report, we have 26 lab-focused measures in the AIM report right now. We started with a list of 200, and then we pared it down and prioritized it to a list of 26 that are really some of the most impactful and commonly seen measures in lab facilities. We do have more on the way. This year, we're going to be adding a further 12-ish measures. So we're going to fill this entire page with lab measures. And you can see that the measures span lots of the different areas of lab buildings that you would encounter where you could save energy. We have measures relating to the building level HVAC systems and their controls, to room level controls and ventilation, to occupant engagement efforts as well. And then we have quite a lot of measures relating to fume hood controls and upgrades of the fume hoods. And then in the gray box here, they haven't been sorted by type, but we're going to be doing something exciting, which is adding quite a few recommissioning measures. So tweaking controls and tuning up controls and showing where savings are going to come from doing that in lab facilities. For every one of these measures, there's actually a lot of information in there as well. So here's just a quick example measure. This is one that involves adding variable volume controls to fume hoods. So in this case, you can see at the top of the measure description, you get a savings and cost summary for the measure. What did you save? What is it likely to cost? And then it's got information about the impact on the energy use intensity and on the energy score, the Labs2Zero energy score of the facility. We've got a description that includes a lot of really useful information that came from our measures and impacts TAC. That includes things like a summary of the measure and why it saves energy. It talks about different ways you can go about implementing that measure. For VAV fume hoods, there's a couple different ways you can do it, and it will guide you through that. It talks about factors that could impact the savings expected at your own facility, other benefits that are non-energy in origin. It then very importantly talks about which stakeholders you're going to have to think about engaging at your facility, what types of consultants you're going to have to think about engaging to fully develop this project from the ASHRAE level 1 type level into a full implemented project. And then at the bottom here, there's a couple paragraphs talking about how the savings calculation was done, what type of assumptions were made, and then also where the cost estimates, the implementation cost estimates came from, and things at your facility that could impact those. So I hope you're excited to try out AIM. We really do feel that, it's a very impactful way and a quick way to start getting ideas for how to improve the performance of lab buildings. And that's something we need to do now more than ever. The quickest way to get started is to sign up for the free demo version of AIM, which has all of the features that I've talked about, but just has a limited number of the energy efficiency measures programmed in there. So it's very easy to get started. We have a quick start guide on the Lab Benchmarking Tool website. It's just 2 pages. It'll tell you how to get going with AIM. We also, if you don't want to use your own building data to test it out, there's also a sample building listed on the website. You can try entering the data for the sample building, give it a shot. Also, we do offer user trainings on AIM, and we will be offering more of those. So if one is happening, at a time that works for you, then definitely join us for a training. The full AIM service is a subscription service. You can buy a subscription on the LBT website, direct on the website, so then that opens up everything right away to all the rest of the measures. You'll see on the website that we did achieve our goal of making this low cost, because in fact, you can get AIM reports for every one of your buildings, as many buildings as you want, for much less than the cost of a single traditional on-site energy audit for a lab facility. So definitely encourage you to try it out. Okay, so the third and last piece that I want to talk about here is our brand new upcoming professional accreditation program. Now, this has always been something that we've planned for the program, but this is the year where we're going to start rolling this piece out. So we're going to have 2 levels of professional accreditation. We're going to have a Labs2Zero champion level, and we're going to have a more in-depth Labs2Zero expert accreditation. So first, I want to talk about the champions. So the idea behind becoming an I2SL Labs2Zero champion is that you have and you can demonstrate a broad knowledge of our programs, much like I've been telling you about today. You know the program components, you know what tools we offer. This is going to be a fairly quick and easy accreditation to obtain. There's going to be free trainings. It'll probably be Zoom online training, followed by a fairly quick open book quiz to qualify you for the accreditation. It will be completely free. It is coming very soon. What we're doing is we are, first of all, releasing it to our chapters, our I2SL chapters as a pilot, and then we'll take it to a wider release later this year. There's quite a few reasons you might want to become a Labs2Zero champion. For example, just the professional recognition, it's another thing another logo, another thing you can put after your name. We will be listing our champions if you want to be listed on our website as well. And it really sets you apart as the person who's able to, guide your colleagues or your clients to the right tools to solve their issues with their lab buildings. We're also going to be providing a venue for you to provide input on Labs2Zero program direction as well. We'll have regular calls where you can come and join and, let us know how things are going and what you would need from the program. Our second level is the Labs2Zero expert. Now that's a much more in-depth technical training. And the idea here is to, develop some expertise on using our technical tools and also being able to train other people and show other people how to use them. It's also coming soon. There's some obvious advantages of becoming a Labs2Zero expert as well. It really is reputation building. You would be known as the resident expert on using these tools. People will come to you to use these tools. You can also get qualified to host official Labs2Zero trainings, which you can run out there in the industry. And it's a great way, if you're a consultant, it's a great way to help build your business. You can guide clients through this whole process of going through Labs2Zero and help them reduce operational costs in their facilities. And, if you're somebody at, a lab owning organization, you can do the same thing with your colleagues, really building your reputation as that person who's the expert on how to do this stuff. So just to wrap up, thank you for listening through all of the prongs of our program here. I just want to make a couple recommendations. So, we know, of course, all of us, that anyone working on lab buildings these days is under a great deal of pressure to reduce costs and improve performance. And with the Labs2Zero program, we're providing tools that do help meet those challenges. So I want you all to consider this an invitation to start using these tools, use them to assess performance, to identify opportunities and potential projects, and then develop those projects, go implement them and save energy, costs, emissions, and then tell us about it. Send us an email or maybe even submit a conference abstract for the annual conference coming up this year or next year. We'd absolutely love to hear about it. And then one more tip to stay in the loop on all things I2SL, in fact, but certainly things Labs2Zero, follow I2SL on LinkedIn. That would be awesome. And then if you want to tell us what you think, how you feel about the program, any of your successes, we would love to hear about it. This is the Labs2Zero email here, and a reminder of the LBT website address where all of the Labs2Zero tools can be found.